Something is happening in British politics that Westminster does not want to discuss openly. Not in the briefing rooms. Not in the corridors of power. Not in the carefully managed political programmes that pass for serious journalism on the BBC. Something that the people who have run this country for decades recognise as the single greatest threat to the political order they have spent their careers maintaining. Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage are moving toward each other, and the combined force of what that convergence represents. The hundreds of thousands of Restore Britain members, the millions of Reform UK voters, the vast territory of British political opinion that neither the Conservative Party nor Labour speaks to anymore, is enough to end the two-party system that has governed this country for a century. That is why Westminster is in panic. Not the managed, performative panic of politicians who have identified a useful enemy. The real thing, the kind that produces emergency meetings and urgent phone calls and the sudden discovery, in newsrooms that spent years ignoring both men, that Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage are stories worth covering. Subscribe now. What follows is the full account of why the Lowe-Farage political space is the most important development in British politics today, and why the people in power are right to be frightened of it. Let us start with what each man represents separately, because you cannot understand the significance of their convergence without understanding what they each bring to it. Nigel Farage needs no introduction to anyone who has followed British politics in the last 3 decades. He is the most consequential political figure of his generation by any honest measure. He delivered the referendum. He delivered the Leave vote. He built UKIP from nothing into a force that terrified the Conservative Party into changing its fundamental position on Europe. He built the Brexit Party and then stepped back and then came back and built Reform UK into the most popular party in Britain. He has been written off more times than anyone in the history of British politics, and he has outlasted every obituary written about him. What Farage brings to the political space he occupies is something that cannot be manufactured or imported. He brings trust. The trust of millions of people who have watched him say the same things for 30 years and watched those things turn out to be correct. On Europe, on immigration, on the disconnect between the political class and the people it was supposed to serve. That trust is the most valuable political asset in Britain today, and it belongs, exclusively and non-transferably, to him. Rupert Lowe is a different kind of figure, and the difference matters. He did not come to politics through the traditional routes. He came through business, through the chairmanship of Southampton Football Club, through the world of commerce and deal-making and the management of real organisations with real consequences for real people. He arrived in Parliament as a Reform UK MP for Great Yarmouth in 2024, left the party after internal disputes, and then did something that no politician of his background normally does. Rather than retreating, he advanced. He founded Restore Britain. He built it into a registered political party with over 115,000 members, surpassing the Conservative Party's membership. He did this in months rather than years. He did this without the infrastructure of an established party, without the media access that comes with institutional legitimacy, and without the 30 years of groundwork that Farage had to lay before his projects reached comparable scale. What Lowe brings is something Farage does not have, and has never had. Institutional credibility without institutional capture. He is not a career politician. He has not spent his adult life learning to say things carefully enough to avoid causing offence. He speaks with the directness of someone who has had to make decisions with real consequences, and who has not yet learned the political habit of wrapping everything in qualifications designed to protect the speaker rather than inform the listener. In Parliament, he has said things that professional politicians would never say, not because the things were wrong, but because saying them has a cost that career politicians are not willing to pay. The combination of what these two men represent is something the British political landscape has not seen before. Farage has the voters. Lowe has the members and the institutional legitimacy of a formally registered party with a growing national structure. Farage has the name recognition and the trust built over decades. Lowe has the credibility of a man who walked away from the comfortable option and chose the harder path because he believed it mattered. Farage has the movement. Lowe has the organisation. Together, they represent a political force with no equivalent in contemporary British politics. Now let me explain why Westminster is panicking. Not in abstract terms, but specifically, with reference to the numbers and the structural realities that the panic is responding to. The Conservative Party is polling in the low 20s, with no credible path to recovery before the next general election. Its membership has fallen to the point where Restore Britain, a party that did not exist 18 months ago, has more members. Its leadership is engaged in a slow, painful reckoning with what it stands for that has produced no clarity and no momentum. The people who left the Conservatives for reform work are not coming back. The question is not whether the Conservatives recover their former voters, but whether the Conservative Party survives in its current form as a serious political vehicle at all. Labour is in a different kind of crisis. Its polling has collapsed from the historic-seeming majority of July 2024 to a position where it trails Reform Oak nationally. Its Prime Minister is operating with a net favourability rating that historically precedes resignation. Its internal dynamics are fracturing, with figures who have been waiting patiently for their moment beginning to position themselves for the post-Starmer period that now looks less like a distant possibility and more like an approaching reality. Into this landscape of institutional collapse on both sides of the traditional divide, the Lowe Farage political space offers something that neither established party can currently offer: a clear and unapologetic articulation of what millions of British people actually believe, that the borders should be controlled and that the failure to control them has had consequences that the political class has refused to acknowledge honestly, that the people who built and funded the welfare state should be its primary beneficiaries, that the institutions of this country, from the BBC to the police to the CPS, have been captured by a set of ideological assumptions that do not represent the views of the majority they are supposed to serve, that the compact between citizen and state has been broken by the people who are supposed to honour it. These are not extreme positions. They are the positions of a large majority of the British public in poll after poll, on issue after issue. The extraordinary thing is not that politicians are saying them. The extraordinary thing is that for so long, so few politicians were willing to say them at all. Now, I want to address directly the question of whether the Lowe Farage political space is a genuine alliance or a rivalry, because this is where the analysis becomes interesting and where the panic in Westminster is most revealing. Lowe and Farage are not running the same party. Restore Britain and Reform UK are separate entities with separate memberships, separate structures and separate political identities. There are areas of overlap in their voter bases and areas of potential competition for the same constituencies. The possibility that they split the vote in ways that allow Labour or Conservative candidates to hold seats they would otherwise lose is a genuine strategic risk for both movements. But here is what Westminster is not telling you about that risk. The establishment's calculation has always been that division on the right is its greatest protection. That as long as the anti-establishment vote is split between enough different vehicles, the first-past-the-post system will continue to convert a minority of votes into a majority of seats for the parties that have always governed. That Farage and Lowe will be too busy competing with each other to mount the coordinated challenge that would actually threaten the settled order. That calculation is not wrong as a theory, but it is increasingly wrong as a description of what is actually happening. Because the forces driving people toward both Restore Britain and Reform UK are the same forces, the same failures, the same betrayals, the same accumulated evidence that the people who have been in charge do not represent the people they were elected to serve. And people who are motivated by the same underlying concerns tend, eventually, to find ways to coordinate even when their initial vehicles are different. The conversations are happening, not in press conferences, not in public statements that can be weaponized by the media. In the private spaces where serious political people talk seriously about what they are trying to achieve and how to achieve it. Westminster knows the conversations are happening. That knowledge is part of what is producing the panic. Because if Lowe and Farage find a way to coordinate, whether through formal merger, through electoral pacts, through agreed divisions of territory that prevent vote splitting in the seats that matter, the arithmetic becomes genuinely threatening to everyone who currently holds power. A coordinated Restore Britain and Reform UK operation, drawing on combined memberships, combined donor networks, combined name recognition, and the combined trust of millions of voters who have decided they are done with the old parties, would be the most significant political development in Britain since the formation of the Labour Party a century ago. Let me say something about the man in Downing Street and why his government's response to this development reveals more about the panic than any briefing document could. Starmer's government has responded to the rise of the Lowe Farage political space with the same tools it has used against every challenge it does not know how to address honestly. Labels. Associations. The suggestion that the concerns motivating the voters of both movements are not legitimate political positions but evidence of radicalization or manipulation. The attempt to make support for either Lowe or Farage socially costly rather than to address the substance of what they are saying. These tools have not worked. They have not worked against Farage for 30 years, and they are not working against Lowe now. The people they are aimed at have watched them deployed before. They have drawn their conclusions about the institutions deploying them, and they have decided, in increasing numbers and with increasing certainty, that a political class willing to use these tools against legitimate democratic movements is a political class that has forfeited its claim to represent them. The panic in Westminster is the panic of people who have run out of honest arguments and are watching their dishonest ones fail in real time. The smear does not work anymore. The label does not stick anymore. The tactical voting argument has dissolved with the Conservative Party that used to give it force. The institutional media that used to be able to shape public perception has lost the authority over its audience that once made it effective. What remains, on the establishment side, is the electoral system, first past the post. The structural barrier that has converted popular insurgencies into parliamentary footnotes throughout British political history. It is a real barrier. I will not pretend otherwise. But it is a barrier that diminishes as the vote concentrates, and the vote is concentrating, in the north, in the Midlands, in the coastal towns and the post-industrial communities and the suburban seats, where the people who have been failed longest are now voting in ways that reflect how completely they have been failed. Britain is watching something happen that has no precedent in modern political history. Two movements, led by two very different men with very different backgrounds and very different styles, are occupying the same political territory and drawing on the same deep reservoir of legitimate anger about the same legitimate failures. Whether they find a formal way to combine their forces or whether they remain parallel operations competing for the same voters, the combined weight of what they represent is already reshaping the political landscape faster than the people trying to stop them can adapt. Westminster is in total panic. It should be. Because the people who built that panic into the political system through 15 years of managed failure are running out of time to prevent the consequences of what they built. Farage has spent 30 years being told his moment would never come. Lowe has built in 18 months what most parties take decades to construct. Together, whether formally or informally, they represent the most serious challenge to the settled political order that this country has seen in living memory. The British people who have been waiting for that challenge deserve to know how close it actually is. Subscribe. Share this. Because what is happening between Lowe and Farage is the story that will define the next chapter of British politics, and the chapter has already begun. Thank you, and I will see you next time.